Day 229. Jeremiah 35, 36 and 37. God points Jeremiah toward the Rechabites, a family group who had faithfully followed the instructions given to them by their ancestor Jonadab. They had maintained a particular way of life for generations because they had been told to do so. God uses their obedience as an example to Judah. The people of Judah had received God's instructions again and again through his prophets, yet they continued to disobey. The whisper is simple but challenging. Sometimes we are very good at listening to people, but very poor at listening to God. The Rechabites remind us that consistency matters. It is easy to say, "I believe God," but our everyday choices reveal whether we are actually listening. Are we obedient only when it is convenient? Do we follow God's principles when nobody is watching? Or do we hear his instructions but keep postponing obedience? God's response to the Rechabites: faithfulness. Their obedience was noticed. And that is encouraging for us today. God sees faithfulness, even when other people don't. You may be doing the right thing, and receiving very little recognition for it. You may be choosing honesty when dishonesty would be easier. You may be remaining faithful to your values, when everyone around you seems to be doing the opposite. Keep going. Faithfulness is never wasted. Now let's move on. God tells Jeremiah to write down the messages he has given him. Jeremiah's words are eventually read before the king. But when the king hears the words of the scroll, instead of humbling himself and responding to God's warning, he cuts the scroll apart and throws the pieces into the fire. Think about that for a moment. The message was uncomfortable, so the king tried to destroy the message instead of changing his behavior. And don't we sometimes do something similar? Perhaps someone gives us advice we don't want to hear. Maybe scripture challenges an attitude we have developed. Maybe a difficult conversation exposes something in our lives that needs to change. Sometimes, rather than asking, "What is this teaching me?" we ask, "How can I get rid of the person, message, or situation making me uncomfortable?" But avoiding a warning does not remove the consequence. The passage reveals God's desire behind the warning. He wanted the people to hear the message and turn from their wrongdoing. That is important. God's correction is often an invitation to change, not simply a declaration of punishment. When God exposes something in us, perhaps the better question is not, "Why am I being criticized?" Perhaps it is, "What is God trying to correct in me?" Then Jeremiah continues speaking God's message. Even though the circumstances are becoming increasingly difficult, he is arrested and imprisoned. Imagine being faithful to your calling, and still ending up in a difficult place. That reminds us of something we sometimes forget. Doing what is right does not always produce immediate comfort. Jeremiah's obedience did not protect him from hardship, but hardship did not mean God had abandoned him. And that is a powerful lesson for today. Maybe you are doing your best as a parent, teacher, leader, spouse, friend or professional, and things still aren't going the way you expected. Maybe you have prayed, obeyed, worked hard, and yet you find yourself in a season that feels like a prison. Jeremiah's story reminds us that difficulty is not necessarily evidence that you are on the wrong path. Sometimes, faithfulness simply means continuing to do what is right, even when the outcome is uncertain. Particularly significant is that King Zedekiah privately asks Jeremiah whether there is a word from the Lord. There was. Jeremiah did not change the message to make the king feel better. He remained truthful. And that gives us another lesson. We should value truth more than approval. It is tempting to tell people what they want to hear. But real love does not always say what is comfortable. Sometimes love tells the truth gently, courageously, and faithfully. So as we reflect on these passages, perhaps 3 questions are worth carrying with us. Am I listening to God, or simply hearing him? When I receive correction, do I become defensive, or do I become teachable? And finally, when doing the right thing becomes difficult, will I remain faithful? The people in these chapters were given opportunities to listen, change, and respond. The Rechabites listened. Jeremiah remained faithful. But many in Judah refused to change. And the difference was not that they lacked information. They had heard the message. The difference was what they did with what they heard. It is not enough to hear God's voice. We must be willing to respond to it. So wherever you are today, take a quiet moment. Listen. Reflect. And if there is something God has been asking you to change, don't keep putting it off. Obedience today may save you from a consequence tomorrow.